Okay. Hi. It's the 25th of November. And this is Anthropology, Group 2. I'm going to talk to you today about the comparative turn. Woo! Okay, the comparative turn. Hello. So I've been talking about, or the way I thought of this course was that I would spend the first 8 classes with a critique of anthropology so you knew where it came from and all of the problems of that anthropology. Its colonial context, its great white men kind of perspective, right? The heroic field worker going off to discover knowledge in the jungles, and so on. And then the next part, for the next few weeks, I was trying to show you how anthropology had tried to respond or had changed because of that criticism. Right? So its move into questions of how we write texts, how knowledge is collected, the critique of colonialism, then movements into anthropology at home, direct action, workers' inquiry type anthropology. Now, another and more recent way in which anthropology has reinvented itself, it shares with a number of other disciplines, and we can call it something like the comparative turn. And this comparative turn is especially strong in urban studies. So it builds on anthropology at home. It's strong in geography and in sociology. And it's not really completely new. You will remember that when I talked about Evans Pritchard, I was saying that everything from the beginning is always already comparative when you're writing about others. In fact, that's the structural problem with anthropology that it shares with sociology, really. There's something unexamined about the politics, the hierarchical politics of staring at people and writing books about them. Because that structure is a controlling one. The person who writes the books has the say over what is knowledge and what happens to that knowledge. Of course, they don't have the complete say. Now, recent studies of historical, cultural, and heritage urbanism, because a lot of urbanism is heritage studies, where the city comes from, how it is shaped and changes. And one of the reasons why comparativism and the comparative turn has got a new energy is because of a greater attention to the global context and actually challenges that come from urbanism from outside of Europe, which is well overdue. I have in mind the work of people like Roy, Ananya Roy, Jennifer Robinson, Mukherjee, Laura Baer, Brett Nielsen, Ned Rossiter, some of the people like this. Hi. People like this have been writing in the context of a global framework, challenging the ways in which assumptions about writing stories about others, narrative, and scale work. Do you understand what scale is in sociology, geography, or anthropology? Anyone? Hi. Join us. Join me. Do you understand, anyone, what scale is? The question of scale, what would that be? Why would scale be an issue to debate as a kind of assumption in sociology or anthropology? So what is coded there in scale is a comparison of types. Quite often in urbanism, in urban studies, people think of the city as a scaled up version of a small community, or even more of a body, right? The city is like a body. It has networks which are like a nervous system. There's a backbone, there's a heart, right? The heart of the city. When we talk about the heart of the city, we mean, what do we mean? We mean District 1. We talk about its main arteries, right? But they started to question, and there's this assumption of scale, and that this was an important factor for comparison was kind of went without saying, because at what level are you comparing one city with another, one community with another, one place with another place, either within the city or across cities? Others brought in questions of infrastructure and borders especially, and that was really interesting and an important part of this as well, because comparison across borders is possible in the context of global, only possible for some. My take on this comparative turn is that maybe we've been going about it the wrong way. My little challenge anyway is that debates in urban planning, they might look radically different if comparative methodologies were seriously reconsidered and funding rethought within a really inclusive and responsive approach. What I want to present today is what an inclusive, radically inclusive form of research would be. To see if that is strong enough or interesting enough to challenge and replace the ways in which anthropology and urban studies and sociology went on as it previously has, because of the critique of that great white man kind of model, or that colonial model, or that authority model, the authority of the author to say what knowledge is, to say what's significant about a society. What we've been going about, I suggest we've been going about it the wrong way. And the debates about comparison might have to look different. And debates about urban planning have to look different if you take a radical, inclusive, participatory perspective. Inclusive methodologies is what I'll be talking about. Inclusive methodologies means methodologies that include the people who are the subjects of the research in the research as researchers. And that will be very different to the model of anthropology, which is something like that, but not quite. The anthropologist claims to, in a way, write their texts with their informants. But as I think I've already said, the informant, the name comes from a military or police action, right? An informant, an informer is someone who tells the secrets to the police or to the enemy, to the army. What if we really have been thinking about this the wholly wrong way? So I want to talk about inclusive methodologies, so you at least know what these are and how the debates about inclusive methodologies have proliferated in various modes. There have been many of them, many inclusive methodologies. I guess I used to do a whole lecture on this and now I've dropped it. But I guess the big anthropological move that really seemed to make sense at the time, but maybe it got some problems, was the move to dialogic anthropology. So taking seriously the idea that anthropologists rely wholly on their informants for information about what they're writing about. Right? From Malinowski onwards, the native point of view was so crucial. Then making them the co-author of the text seems obvious. Right? That it's not just Malinowski who writes them, but Malinowski with their input. Of course, the writerly nature of anthropology is its claim to authority. And so, for so long, anthropologists wrote as if they were the hero, producer of knowledge. Clifford Geertz, for example, writes arriving malarial and diffident in the Balinese village that he says, we plan to study as anthropologists. But he arrives with his wife. He says, the first words are, my wife and I arrived in the Balinese village. But afterwards, she kind of disappears and is erased, as are the Balinese, increasingly, except as objects of knowledge. Now, the dialogic form will recognise the dependency of the anthropologist on local people. And there was a book called Moroccan Dialogues by Dwyer. Let me write that one up, because I really recommend it. Moroccan Dialogues by Dwyer, in which he made a study in Morocco, obviously, where the whole of his fieldwork was a series of conversations with a holy man, a fakir, who is called in the book the fakir. And instead of Dwyer writing paragraphs that summarize what he's learned from talking to people in that part of Morocco, he presents on the page the actual words of the fakir. Like, it's a transcribed interview, basically. This was dialogical anthropology. You would show the slow unfolding of understanding that came to the anthropologist through talking, through interview with someone who knows, because local people know, right? That's what's assumed. And we see the voice, the actual words of the fakir explaining to the anthropologist how things are in that place. And that's really interesting, and that book was important. Even if, when you look at the book, you can see certainly on the page the fakir's words, whole paragraphs, as he said them. Although when you read the preface, you see lightly edited. Edited by who? Edited by the anthropologist, Dwyer. He is an anthropologist. He's also, I think he was head of Amnesty International for a long time. He's not an institutionalized anthropologist in the same way as most. We see the words of the fakir, but we also see the questions from the anthropologist. Although they're in the text, they're in bold characters. and the fakir who says more, but his words are in normal text. And that, to me, already rang some alarm bells, made me think, why is the anthropologist's words so important that they have to be, and the fakir is just in normal text? But it wouldn't be better the other way around, so I don't know. Then as you're reading it, you see, I think about 3/4 of the way through, and quite positive or progressive on Dwyer's part to have kept this in. We read the fakir saying to him, but these are your questions. This question is not one I'm interested in. I'm just answering because you want to know these things. So even though Dwyer was trying to show the fakir's point of view by allowing his words to appear, the questions were from the anthropologist. So quite largely his own. And not only that, the book is put out in the name of Kevin Dwyer. He's the author of the fakir's words, so ventriloquy in a way. And he also adds footnotes to what the fakir says to explain the meaning sometimes of what the fakir is saying. The fakir doesn't get to put footnotes or to change things. There have been anthropologists who have allowed their informants to read their texts and make changes, exclude things and so on, but I'm suggesting a more radical version of that, as you'll see. So dialogic form with Ted Locks and with others was very popular first way to attempt to do inclusive methodologies. Vincent Crapanzano, one of the authors who also wrote on the writing culture school debate, he said, but there's not a dialogue. When you look at the page and you read it, in your head there's one voice reading through the page. It's a dialogue. In the same way that, you know, a dialogue is a thing inside a text that shows someone is speaking. It's still a novel where the dialogic is fictional, really. And a dialogue implies back and forth, a negotiation of meaning between the speaker and the two speakers. And that wasn't exactly the case when one speaker is controlling everything, editing and footnoting and arranging the layout, deciding what to include and what not to include. Another kind of inclusive methodology was very strong. Was for participation, getting people to participate in research, was using counter-mapping or mapping strategies, getting people to map their community, to make maps of their community. This is one I've used myself, to make maps of their understanding of a place, and then to collect those maps together as different versions of the same place. So you get the phenomenon of many interpretations of the same thing, more or less agreeing on the boundaries of community or whatever, but you know, mapping projects have been a very strong part of inclusive methodologies, though they also have the same problem as dialogue, because the person who presents mapping as a model remains in control of the project. Even if the informants themselves, the subjects themselves, the research subjects are making the maps, still someone is selecting what counts as knowledge and what happens to that knowledge, which is all important. Another response to all the problems of anthropology was to take on the role of the activist or the advocate, the scholar advocate, especially in urban geography. Different communities needed support. right? Minority groups or queer groups or political campaign groups, they would sometimes kind of find themselves with an anthropologist attached who volunteered to gather all the information and knowledge for them and present their material present their side of the story, so to speak. To be an advocate and an activist on their behalf. Okay, so diasporic groups, migrant groups, queer groups, gay, lesbian, whatever, campaign groups around maybe a mining campaign or unions, something like that. And the anthropologist would make knowledge that would help their cause. So giving up the idea of some fantasy of objective knowledge. If you've hung around campaign groups at all, you might know that one of the issues for campaign groups is the hero ego model, right? The person who becomes just a little bit too empowered to be the spokesperson for a group and ends up talking all the time. They're still a controlling authority. And of course, a big problem with this is, what about those groups that maybe not everyone would support? It means that anthropology, well, this version of anthropology can only be for liberal, do-good causes, and you can't really study then in the same way the right wing, the fascists, or something you don't quite like. I don't know, bankers, for example. Another huge response, a part of inclusive methodologies, has to come under the framework of decolonizing epistemology. Actually, I wonder how many of you have been following this or have come across this before. Decolonizing knowledge, decolonizing epistemology. Is that on your radar? No? Decolonizing knowledge, decolonizing sociology, decolonizing the curriculum. What about feminizing the curriculum? Is that something? Because decolonizing the curriculum is sort of similar. Right, okay, I'll try and not be too vague about this. It's really become a thing in the last 5 years or so, decolonizing the curriculum because of Black Lives Matter and because of things like that a bit. But it's been around for 20, even 40, no, longer. But 40 years ago, a really key text that I think for this was written, The Intimate Enemy by Ashish Nandy, that I've mentioned before. I should mention again, because it's worth reading, especially the introduction. Ashish Nandy, The Intimate Enemy. He is an Indian, 1982. Funny, that was 1982 too. The Intimate Enemy is by Ashish Nandy. He is a psychologist, an Indian psychologist. He writes about Freud, writes about Gandhi. But his argument in The Intimate Enemy was influenced a lot by W.E.B. Du Bois, who wrote in the 1930s in America, whose concept of double consciousness was also taken up by Paul Gilroy. But it's something like this, that in India, like in Vietnam, the schools were run by French, right? French teachers, French curriculum. Under colonialism, in the colonial period, the schools, they were even called école, blah, 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 right? The schools were, in India, the schools were run by the British. So the schools for the Indian Civil Service for officials and for everyone who went to school, they followed an English curriculum, you know, which led to very strange things, like Indian friends of mine knowing more about P.G. Wodehouse than could possibly be thought reasonable. None of my friends knew about P.G. Wodehouse, or knowing Shakespeare well, or knowing the Enlightenment philosophers or the Romantic poets, or Enid Blyton or Emily Bronte. Their education in sociology and in psychology was largely the same as those in Europe. Dead white men. Dead white men. Weber, Marx, Freud, Durkheim. The same people you're studying, sure. And Nandi's argument is that the concepts and the authors that were brought in through this education were the categories in which you thought. The concepts in which you thought, and yet your thinking was against the culture, the empire, of the British Empire, that brought you that teaching. So the enemy was somehow an intimate enemy. Your head was split in two, wanting to be against the British imperialists, yet growing up, learning everything about them, learning to think critically through the very texts that they taught you. And of course, this was reflected in a kind of racist structure of institutions, that white teachers were given more power, that Indian authors were secondary or somehow like commentaries on, not prime texts. And there was a need for then a kind of home rule or Gada or Swaraj, decolonizing of the philosophical and conceptual framework within which India thought. And that it was almost impossible because of the intimacy with that history. Even the opposition to colonialism learnt in large part from that colonialism. The education and the thinkers, the writers, the critics that were taught were also the ones that inspired Motilal Nehru or Jawaharlal Nehru or Mahatma Gandhi or Subhas Chandra Bose. I'm sure it was the same with the French here. The French ran the schools, French thinkers were, French literature, French culture was promoted. When the French left, of course, changed a little bit. Americans. And the effects of that are still with us. If you go in the library now, your library here in TDT, not that many books, but what books it has in sociology are predominantly, the majority of them are 1950s American sociology. Okay, someone has donated them books, obviously. But you know, that's really strange when, well, I don't know. The critique of the colonial, decolonizing the curriculum is a criticism that's something like the feminist critique, which says you have to actually do the hard work of searching out texts by women, texts by Black Africans or Africans or Indians or Vietnamese, to put them in the curriculum as addition to the ones that easily come to us in sociology, like Marx, Weber, Durkheim, Freud. And in Anthropology, Malinowski, Evans Pritchard, blah, blah, blah. I mean, why it's like feminism is the obvious thing. So many of the great white dead anthropologists only got their books done because of the women that were silently behind them. Elsie Mason for Malinowski, Hildred Geertz, as I mentioned. Edith Turner, who without Edith Turner doing the work for Victor Turner's books would not have got out. Even Fraser. And so now, okay, we do have a number of female anthropologists and people make the effort to read them, but still there is a structural imbalance. I bet if we did a little pop quiz, we'd find some revealing things. Okay, so in the last, all right, I want you to say, in the last 5 books that you've read, how many of them are, all right, let's take the time. Can you get out a piece of paper and write down the last 5 books you read? Okay, the last 5 authors that you read, who were they? Any book in for your school. No, this university. This year, what 5 books have you read? In your life, what were the last books you read? What have you got in your bag? Which books? Can you write down the last 5, please? All right, what were the last 5 books, authors? Who were the last 5 authors that you read? Okay? The last 5. I'll do it as well. Trying to remember. Okay, I read Eric, Harms, I read, what's the name on ports? I'd have to look. You can look it up on your notes if you need to. All right, Kidwai, Habib. That I don't remember is just a sign of my old age, I hope, not just of the need to decolonize the. All right, Marx. Okay. Quick. This shouldn't take so long. The last 5 authors, if you don't get it right, it doesn't matter. Whatever the last 5 were, make them up if you have to. Who were the 5 authors that you read this year? Any? You don't have to have read the whole book. Who did you look at? Done? Who's finished? Anyone? One more? Quick, 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 quick. Quick, 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 quick. Can't take that long. I did mine in seconds. While you're doing that, I'll talk about another inclusive methodology that people tried was to give cameras to the informants. So the cameras would photograph what was important for them. Giving cameras to people was a part of visual anthropology. They handed out cameras and people took photographs of what they thought was important for themselves. But similar to mapping, what knowledge was produced by that meant that someone had to select which photographs, which images would be put into a book or something. So there's a whole series of different participatory methodologies that people have been calling for, and they've been produced, and the discussion has been going on for a long time. But there's also been sometimes challenges against the participatory model by the informants. Okay, has anyone finished? You rethought it. Done? Not yet? There were challenges to participatory method, challenges to the leadership, because there needs to be a facilitator for a participatory method. So there was still someone in control, which is the whole idea of getting away from, right, having the informants have a say about what becomes knowledge can't work, even if you give them cameras or give them maps or listen to their point of view or quote their words, if there's still a controlling authority that puts the information into the library, into the policy, into the bank. Someone finished yet? Anyone? 4 will do. Okay? You're the first. All Vietnamese? Yeah? Okay. Cool. Oh, no. They're not the only categories. Okay, you have to help me. Which ones are men, which ones are women? Can you mark if they're Vietnamese names for me, because I can't tell? Which ones are boys, which are girls, which are men and which are women? Just write M. M. M, yeah. No, that'll do, just M. F, okay? Don't worry, doesn't need to be, just M or F. M. Right? Okay, good. So, all right. Read to me, tell me who the authors are, whether they are male or female, where they are from. Male or female, where they're from. First one? From Lion Teeth? Westerner or from which country? Vietnamese journalist, Lion Teeth. Okay? Political anthology? Okay? Yeah. The Godfather, crime books. They are Westerners. Okay. Good. Introduction to Sociology by male or female from which country? Vietnamese. Okay, 7 types of intelligence.
I think he's American.
American, male or female?
Male.
The Godfather, male, Mario Puzo, right? And Kitchen Confidential, female, male. Is it? Oh, kitchen, I assume. Terrible. From which country? Yeah. Okay. So 7 types of intelligence. One. The Godfather. One. Kitchen Confidential. There you go. Okay. Empower Students book. Oh, by Sophie Fuggle. Haha. Very good. Giao Thiên Mac, male Vietnamese, right? Chick no. Okay, good. We're getting results already. Only a pop survey, but thank you. Marketing 4.0 by Vietnamese or American? Okay. Male, male, male. All Vietnamese? No. English, female. Okay. Great. This is taking far too long, but it's fun. Okay. The Theory of Sociology is by who? American or Vietnamese? Vietnamese, male or female? Nui Phu? Female. Cultural Sociology? Cultural Sociology, male, female, American, Vietnamese? Male, Vietnamese? The risk of street prostitution, punks, police and protesters. From where? The risk of street prostitution, punters, police and prostitutes. American, English, female, from which country? Nui. No, English. English. Okay. Communist Communist Party of Vietnam. What is the sensitive person is a gift or a curse? Male, female, American, Vietnamese, Global South. From which country? From which country? Cultural sociology? Vietnamese, female, male? Live as a Paris? From? How does youth cost? Men, women in relationships? Making peace with the opposite sex, John Gray. Philosophy book. Oh, that's one book. Okay. You can redistribute. Done, done, done. Oh, thank you. This one? Okay. Phép lao đòi cùng. Phép lao đòi cùng. Male or female? Phép bết mê con. Male or female? You don't know. Make him an honorary woman. Whoa. Yeah. Cô gái ban đêm, male or female? And trước tiên nói sao? Bông đôi than ba, male or female? Chung đôi băng đá, male, okay. Okay, give me the last four, have a break. Okay. Doing well here. If they are Vietnamese, can you help me? Male or female? Female. Oh, that's male. Does that say male? Okay. Yeah, I get it. I understood now. All female. Which one's you? Guess. Male or female? Female. Cosmos, male. Right? Great, thank you. No, the Little Prince is not female. The Little Prince is Anthony St. Akbari, male. Thank you. Is that everyone? That's all. Fantastic. I forget which one is which. Is that what you would have expected? So interesting. I wonder if it's what you would expect. Okay. I'm going to continue through. If you look at this, what does it tell you? Well, the obvious thing is nobody among us, as I included me, nobody is reading Indian, African, South American women authors. Zero. Okay, if I went back a bit, I would include Spivak. One. But that's one. And anyway, she's in New York. It's not like she's outside of the publishing circuit. She's mainstream nowadays. What does it also tell you? It means that African writers, Indian writers, Turkish writers, people from most of the world are not on our radar much. You have to do extra work to find them. If you want to read something outside the mainstream curriculum, which is, all right, Vietnamese men, much more than Vietnamese women. But actually this is positive because of language. And Western men. And in fact, most of these 10, about 7 of them was J.K. Rowling. No female theorists, no female theorists, no female communists, no female psychoanalysts. Where's Judith Butler? Where's Catherine Hales? Where's so many? Audre Lorde, Bell Hooks. Not even Ashish Nandi, not even Frantz Fanon. You need to change your reading to read Frantz Fanon, to read outside of the predictable. Me too. Read more women, read more African and Indian authors. The world is not just the publishing circuit of the US and the UK. It's so important. And sociology, anthropology, we can't only think of it as just Malinowski, Evans, Pritchard and that tradition. Even though that's what I've been teaching, the whole point is to say, no, everyone should participate in knowledge creation. So more people. No Japanese author? None. No Chinese? None. I'm a bit surprised that there's not more in this column, actually. That's 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. That's less than this one. But that's a factor of language as well, of course. So interesting. If we then added the years to these books, it'd be interesting as well to see what year sociology are you reading? Or maybe do this exercise again. This is a research project for you in your spare time. Do this exercise again, but only with sociology. And add the year and see across your cohort what year, what kind of sociology everyone is reading. It looked to me, just from looking at the authors, that it's 1980s, 1990s version of sociology. In this column, we had quite a few Vietnamese Marxist texts. Great, I'm glad you're reading them. But none of this column were actually reading Marx. That's also a problem. Reading summaries of Marx rather than Marx himself. Read the originals. Much more interesting. I promise you, the commentaries are the dull version. Actually reading the original. Okay, you can't read it in German. You can't, I hope you can read it in Ting Duc, but I can't expect you to read it in Ting Duc. Ein Gespenst geht in Europa. The German is much more exciting. Ein Gespenst. Der Reichtum der Gesellschaften, in welchem kapitalistische Produktionsweise herrscht, erscheint als eine ungemeine Warensammlung. A Warensammlung. It's much more exciting, but okay. In English will do. In Vietnamese will do. Read the original. Marx is translated. Capital is translated. Actually, if someone is going to read the original Vietnamese, the translation into Vietnamese of Capital, I want to read it with you. So, decolonizing the curriculum. This is what it's about. Your curriculum is dominated by men, largely men. Women are not writing or not getting read. They're writing. Often they're writing. Maybe you read more novels by women. Maybe you read more novels by women, but you certainly read more Vietnamese men, and you read by far more Western men than women. And no Africans, no Indian women. Okay, there's a short survey. We should do it longer, do it for sociology, do it for the whole year or the whole program. If we could do it for, what, 300 students in our faculty? 400 students, something like that? No, maybe more. That would give us some result, and we would see the need to make some changes to what's on the reading lists, so that you get a wider education. Anyway, we have to do that work, all of us, to find those texts, because they're not promoted in the same way. Everyone says if you want to understand sociology, you need to read Weber, Marx, Durkheim. They've left out the rest of the world and half the world. So anyway, in research and inclusive methodologies, you get these kind of questions, and they're very important. And it has a long history, and it's not resolved the philosophical problem of what anthropologists should be doing. And these debates, they've entered this comparative turn and renewed comparative urbanism in interesting ways. So Ananya Roy, Jennifer Robinson, Grik Skila, and Aisha Kaglar, she's Turkish. Aisha Kaglar, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. She's a Turkish sociologist, really interesting, doing important work. Grik Skila, who's German. Peck, Robinson, and Roy, that's Ananya Robinson and Jennifer Roy again. So my project is to turn these debates towards the perspectives of now, to ask what's going on when we see who gets to compare the urban in comparative urbanism. It's nearly always the white male Western researcher. The privilege of taking that comparative perspective belongs to a certain kind of class fraction or segment of academia. Right, to be able to do comparative studies, it's usually your well-established male colleagues, male authors. In the research project, maybe a challenge to this is to ask who gets to compare, and is there a way to make a comparative, scaled up urbanism possible for those that we would previously call the subjects or the informants, to have them doing it, to facilitate them doing comparative work. To involve the usually disenfranchised subjects of planning to run commentaries on planning and share them across cities with each other. Because social media allows that kind of communication now. And yes, there would need to be funding because people need to be paid to do research, need to be trained, but this could happen. If we're interpreting cultural heritage, cultural change, and questions of policy comparatively, the first question I'm asking is who does the comparison? And can we make it so that the people who are subjects, the people that really know what's going on, the people that live in the community, can they do the comparative work? The local. By local community, I understand that as local residents. They're the ones that know what's happening, right? They're the ones that inform the sociologist or anthropologist. So make them the researchers, right? And then they will have then control of what becomes knowledge. What gets offered to the comparative exchange with other similar local residents, other communities in participatory mode, because those are the people who are best placed to do that work. They know the situation more than any outsider who parachutes in. Only they just don't have yet the expectation or the assumption or the time, free time, they need to be paid to participate in this biased publishing world. And this publishing world is biased. It's biased towards the circulation of texts from London and New York, basically, or London, New York, Chicago. So members of the community in the widest sense, seen as those best placed to compare, know and understand the logistics of the cities in which they live. These people then could compare through social media, forums and so on, and generate insights which come from them and form for them a part of a larger project that challenges the ownership and management of knowledge with all of its credentializing prejudices of the structure of scholarship. This would be an avowedly local perspective, the critique of normative assumptions about who produces knowledge in research about urban heritage. And it would be the basis for involving and indeed employing the knowledge creating placemaking groups most adversely affected by regeneration and heritage development, and having them lead comparative urban knowledge projects seeking like-minded or similarly situated confreries elsewhere. The key proposal is not a concern to specify in advance what the comparative will throw up, but to include in structural or infrastructural institutional ways with due compensation the perspectives of local communities who participate in the research. This means taking seriously whatever is determined by participants as the local particular concerns. The experiment here is an attempt to follow Robinson and Roy's enthusiasm for imaginative studies that chart experiments and initiatives of unruly and creative intervention to transform, dislodge and divert the established ways of doing sociology. The work of Abu Malik Simon, one of the authors I was reading, also inspires this project insofar as he seeks out what the city does not show, what is covered up or prohibited and kept from people's attention by otherwise normative or spectacular conventions that get rid of the messy labour and politics that brings a city into existence. It may be that work to come will achieve that new typology for comparative methods based on the vernacular practices of urban comparison that Robinson wants, but maybe not. Unruly disruption of the standard analysis and bias might go in unpredicted directions. Wanting to include disenfranchised and disaffected groups within the organisation of research is not simply to line up with those who prophesied the commercialisation of all aspects of the social sciences long ago, along with every other legitimacy claim in scholarship that could not stand up to the malignancy of administrative instrumentality. But the comparative turn, it's so broad in its wide take-up now that some of the initial radicalism has been tamed, and we need this, even if it's still possible, to hang on to a more tentative and uncertain aspect of the approach that embraces the difficult processes of mutual learning. This question remains to be tested if the cracks opened by a wider comparative gesture will be open enough to permit new ways of knowing which can remain wholly speculative. All right, what I'm saying is if you choose to read against this grain, if you